Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, Michael. And here we are for our chapter number 12 today.
Yes, chapter 12. That's it, Jacqui. So welcome to you and welcome to all of our listeners. Today's 25th podcast covers chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's titled The Yoga of Devotion. And because it's a short chapter covering only 20 verses, I've condensed it, Jacqui and listeners, to just the one podcast. So normally we've been spending 2 podcasts on each chapter, but because being shorter, and that'll give me an extra podcast further down the track, particularly for the last chapter, which runs to about 80 verses, four times the length of this one. So just one podcast for chapter 12, everyone. Chapter 12 also concludes the past 6 chapters, which have all been extolling the glorious manifestations and attributes of spirit. It's important here to have a closer look at the word devotion, Jacqui. We say, "Oh, I'm devoted to you" when we fall in love with someone, or they're devoted to their job or whatever it might be. So the word gets bandied around fairly loosely, but we're interested in the true meaning of these sorts of words. So it's worth spending just a few lines on explaining that. So we're talking here about the ultimate devotion a human being can have, which is the devotion to their higher self. Their higher self is the same as the higher self, so it's that aspect of devotion to total unity, if you like. All right, and that's the highest form of devotion. All the other devotions that I've just briefly touched on deal with mortal devotions on the planet Earth, devoted to your wife or your children or your pet dog or your hobbies or your work or whatever it might be. This is a totally different category, but I'm sure everyone understands because we've been talking about it now for the last 6 chapters. So, but just worth seeing the whole chapters on devotion to give a fuller explanation. So, devotion, or bhakti, as it's known in Sanskrit, and you'll often come across that in the material bhakti. So, it's a useful word just to start being introduced to. Is not just a mere flourish of sentimentality or an excessive display of emotions. It's the blossoming of the human personality through the total surrender of its limitations through its illusionary maya. True devotion is one in which the lover becomes one with the beloved. So that's the highest meaning of this word devotion. And the limited ego in relegation, and the limited ego is relegated to its rightful insignificant role. So we're talking here a clear distinction of relegating the egoic mortal self, focusing on that smaller aspect of our being, and putting the devotion where it truly belongs, on our higher self. And in that way, the lover in this case is us, the seekers of truth, being fully devoted and then merging with the one we're beloved to. All right. And there's lots of romantic stories and stuff that talk about the lover and the beloved. But that's on the romantic level, and that's very nice, very, very, very good, especially for the people involved and the viewers, if it's on a film or reading a book or whatever. But we're making this personal and understanding it clearly. So in the previous podcast, Arjuna had just been granted a vision of the Lord's universal form. Now, overwhelmed by love for Sri Krishna, he's ready to do anything to be united with him forever. So remember, it was a vast experience that he had, didn't he? Granted by the special powers that Krishna had given him to see him in that form. And any of these spiritual experiences that any of us have experienced, Jacqui, it's that different feeling inside us. We know it's a higher sort of connection, and that inspires us in a way and drives us to make stronger and stronger connections until we eventually make that final connection. Hence the stress on devotion, because it's the pure love of that higher aspect of our being that'll get us there. There's other steps along the way that I'll reiterate again, which I have on a number of occasions, but that's ultimately the final one that pushes us through to completing the task, if you like. So he says this intensive longing is inevitable in anyone having a genuine mystical experience. I've just read that. Similar descriptions are echoed in the writings of the men and women of God in all ages and traditions. So in other words, all through mankind's recorded history, men and women who have experienced this devotion to the Lord, and that is their higher self, have written about it, taught it, and so on. So it's nothing new that we're looking at or exploring here. It might be new because we haven't done it before, but it's not new in regards how it's been available. Truth's always been available to humans and always will be right through to the end of creation. So faced with this situation, Arjuna, like all seekers of truth, once again finds himself in a state of confusion. All through, he's been in different states of confusion, hasn't he, Jacqui? And, that's a reminder that that's really us. As we're going along, there's things we're introduced to, it's new, we're a bit confused, it doesn't make sense for a while, it even sounds crazy sometimes, but we keep persevering until we sort it out in our own minds and in our own sort of lives, and it eventually starts to make sense. The penny drops. It's those aha moments we have, or spiritual experience, that bring about that greater clarity. And you've had a number on, even just during these podcasts, as well as all the others you've had, and so have also, of course, many of our listeners. So in this state of confusion, and it's useful to be in that state of confusion, there's nothing wrong with that. It means you're curious and you want to sort it out. You're not quite sure what's sort of happening to you. Remember, he's had this almighty experience. It takes a while before you start getting your head around it, and realizing sort of more and more fully. Can take weeks and even months and years before all the dust settles, in a sense, on all of that. So he asks, should one worship the visible God with form, Saguna Brahman, or as a formless invisible God, Nirguna Brahman? Now, don't worry about that, Jacqui and listeners. I'll expand on that just in a few minutes. And he's saying, so he's wanting to know, so we're all clear, worshipping a God with form means like we are in this work. We understand roughly who Krishna is. We've seen pictures in a chariot on the cover. He's with Arjuna. We're learning about that's our higher self and our lower self. Now we've heard description from Krishna, seeing the vision, but even that's not real. The vision, there's no vision of God as such. But that sort of takes it up another level. So, or he's saying, is it better to worship you in this in that sort of vision form that I've just had, no form? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So all the religions always worship a form. Even like Buddhism, which isn't a religion anyway, but you've got statues of Buddha. There's statues of Jesus on the cross and Virgin Mary, his mother, and even with the Hindu religion, there's statues of Krishna and temples built to him, and churches are built to all these people and that. So that's the form aspect. You can look at it and you can talk about it, you can read about it, all of that. The other one is a very rare one, worshipping or coming to realise who God is without any form. Very few people can do that. But I'll explain that in a few minutes. But just so no one's getting worried about the two words I've introduced there, Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. They've both got the words guna in the Jacqui, meaning the three universal energies that bring about the creation and sustain it. Well, one simply means Saguna is within those three gunas. In other words, the realm of Prakriti, the realm of the creation. Nirguna means above the gunas. So that's in that realm, the astral realm or the spiritual realm, where there's no forms. But anyway, I'll explain that, as I say, a little bit more briefly in this next bit. Is there anything you'd want to say there, Jacqui? before I move on?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. One, I'm just thinking, I often come across so many people in different walks of life that are often not interested in spirituality, but often when you have sort of chats with them about just the miraculous nature of life and the universe, people often refer to like even a sense of Mother Nature, and that's probably as far away from religion as you can get, but still have some openness to the awe and the wonder of all of the things go on. So I can't help but think that's a really beautiful way to start to relate to the formless. I know it's not exactly what you're saying, although maybe in some ways it is enough, but it's that thing of you can just look around and think, like for people not spiritual, you can just look around and think this is all incredible. There are so many beautiful, miraculous things that we see and understand, and there's so many miraculous things we see that we don't understand, and people have some sense of the energy or what's behind that. They don't understand it necessarily, but there's this sense of power behind everything that we can see and comprehend and not comprehend. So maybe that's a nice beginner entry point for some people too, just thinking about the formless. I just wonder, when we talk about God and Lord and all of these things, for some people that's a little far removed. But if we can just start thinking in a practical sense, what's around us that looks magical, intriguing, that we've got a sense that there's some very strong, creative, almost magical energy behind things, that could be a nice starting point for people. So that's one thought and sentiment. And just the other thing I'm thinking, I mean, I've had some beautiful spiritual teachers in my time, and they often will have little like altars with symbols of things. And I'm just thinking they've often been so keen to point out that don't get too attached to the symbols. The symbols are just reminders. Like they remind you of the teaching. They remind you of something someone taught you. They remind you of what's behind, that form. So that's just another little thought which comes to mind, which relates to what you're saying.
Well, yes. Just on that last one, I'll be touching on that as well, Jacqui. And I'm going to wind up like touch it, or making reference to Krishna's going to answer. He's asking him which one's better. So the next page basically is dealing with all of that. But just to go back to your first one, and I won't spend much time on it because long discussions and whatever. But I think you'll find that part of what you're saying about the people who are starting to get early sort of connections in there, or particularly in a nature setting, connecting with nature when they go camping or whatever, and because they've left, forgotten or not worrying about their normal everyday lives, jobs, and whatever, they've got time to sort of look around and appreciate a beautiful waterfall, or seeing some animals running across a paddock or sunset or whatever. But you'll find invariably, Jacqui, listeners, that those people, it's only just a beginning for where they'll start more seriously looking, instead of trees or animals or sunsets, at books and statues and teachers. It's too big a step just to go from feeling this awe, a sense of awe with nature, to go down that path. The end of the story is that you inevitably go down the path of worshipping form until you get to a stage where you've got enough understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it and what it's all about, which is what we're all doing in these podcasts, right? And then with this last bit of aspect to devotion, you start realizing you don't need all that knowledge. You don't need all those discussions. You're already living that sort of type of life. And so you're having experiences. So it's like a stepping stone, a huge stepping stone, transitioning from worshipping the form, which first starts with nature, and then more concretely, like in the work we're all doing, and then leads to no form, if that makes sense. But that's for you and everyone else to ponder on and work out as you go along. But that's the way, that's my understanding after all the study I've done and my own experience and dealing with a lot of students along the way. And yeah, Krishna refers to it here, but he doesn't touch on the point you were making about it's like, yeah, I'm not demeaning or anything, but it's like people that you described there, and we've all experienced that. It's like an entry level into this level that we're all operating at now, exploring the knowledge and the truth and listening to a great master like Krishna. So everyone will have to do that in the end, and then you go beyond that. Anyway, I'll continue on and see if it unfolds a bit more. So Krishna answers his question as to which is better, and he says I'm pleased with either path, Arjuna. So he's saying I don't care how you find me as long as you find me. All right. And if it is through looking at gum trees or a sunrise, well, that'd be good too, but it's highly unlikely, is all I'm saying here. But he says, I feel for you, Arjuna, which is all of us. I feel for you that the devotional path of worshipping Saguna Brahman, the one that you can see, is the right approach. And Saguna, as I mentioned briefly a minute ago, Jacqui, meaning here in Prakriti, here in the creation, within the realm of the three guna creation. The other one's the opposite, which I'll refer to now. So he says, setting your heart steadily on the visible aspect of me, and with full devotion, you will quickly come to me. And then he says, those who worship me as Nirguna Brahman also come to me. And Nirguna meaning above the, or beyond the three gunas, beyond Prakriti and beyond the three guna creation. So is that simplifying it a bit, you think, Jacqui? And again, don't stress listeners, you don't have to necessarily remember Nirguna and Saguna Brahman. It's just simply saying what's in the creation and what's above the creation is the two types of worship.
I think it's useful. Like, I'm just thinking there's so much, like so many people around the world stepping away from organized religion, and partly because that's, there's been a lot of problems in a lot of religions. I think in some ways for people moving down this path, it's possibly easier now than even several decades ago to have more comprehension of the formless, because I think people are starting to realize that some of the form attached with the religion and the sort of social control and the confinements which come with that, I might be wrong here, but it's sort of more attached into that sort of organized religion capacity, whereas to think about the energy behind things, the formless, maybe it's just me, I find that much easier to relate to. But I can't help but wonder if some of our listeners find it easier just to sort of disregard some of the symbolism that they've seen and move beyond that. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think you. I agree with what you're saying. The church, and in particular the Christian church, has done itself a lot of damage over the last 20, 30, 40 years with some of the the episodes with pedophile priests and so on. A lot of people, that drove a lot of people, that I've come across and met and read about away from religion. But it's a sort of a trend in many parts of the world, not just the Catholic Church. But what happens for most people, again, my observation, and there's statistics and there's reports and what people say to me and stuff, is that a lot of those people who have sort of left the church have found nothing to fill the void, and they're finding from accounts that there is a void and it's causing them concern. That void could easily be filled if anyone just tapped into this podcast, Jacqui. But not many people know how to do that, or that it's around and aware, or that even any, not just our podcast, but any podcasts that are dealing with this sort of work, and there is a number of people that are doing podcasts. Some of the gurus and so on. But people are too distracted. They use their computers and iPads and everything to look up millions of other things, but don't seem to, or understand or know. Still, there's not enough emptiness in them at this stage to drive them to doing what we're all doing. The person has to wake up, Jacqui and listeners, and everyone who's listening to these podcasts has woken up. They're saying something's missing in my life, and what you'll all eventually come to understand, and I'm sure many are getting a stronger understanding. That's what's missing is the non-awareness and the non-connection of your higher self. That's the emptiness that's there for everyone. Even the person who's got all the wealth in the world rules the entire world. If there was a ruler who could rule all everything, and he or she didn't understand this, would be lying there at night thinking, oh, I've got all this money. I rule the whole world. But I'm still feel something's missing. So that wealth and power and prestige and any of those things are never going to fill that void that's in a being. It's a spiritual void, and God's planted a seed within us in his own image that says eventually this seed will want to sprout and will want to grow. And that seed is the seed of truth, for eventually the truth of who you are and the ultimate connection with who you are. And until any person achieves that, they're never going to be totally satisfied or happy in that total aspect in their lives. And it'll drive them in the end. Anyone, everyone, whether it takes 1,000 lifetimes or 10,000 lifetimes, it's going to drive every human being to eventually realize who they are.
That point in between is very useful that you're making, because I'm just thinking there's many people you come across in life that have a lot of things, but that recognition of a void or something missing or connection to higher self, it's almost like you can watch as you observe people that perhaps it sort of rises momentarily, and as soon as anyone has a sense of the unease, they quickly quell it with something else. Another nice champagne, another shopping expedition, another holiday here or there. So there's actually like a truth component there, isn't there? People have to fall into a space where they can actually be honest and observant in what they feel, which is close to what you're talking about the seed germinating.
Exactly. And being my daughter, I've shared this with you, but I shared it in an early podcast. That's what woke me up in the end. I had everything that I sort of dreamed of in my early years of my life, and late 40s, having achieved it all, it sort of really didn't mean what I thought it would mean. So that's exactly what I've been talking about. Like it doesn't have to be, billions and ruling the whole world. I ruled my little world, and something was missing. And for me, it became very easy, fortunately for me anyway. But that's part of your karmic journey and stuff. But that connection with this seed inside kicked in. And again, I'll relate it later on to understanding karma, that I'd done a fair bit of work in previous lifetimes that got me to this stage. I still had desires, mortal desires, that I focused on. Once I got them out of the way, there was then this other desire. It's called the burning desire for liberation in Shankar's 5 steps to realization. I didn't recognize it as that, but in hindsight, I understand clearly that that's what it was. So it was only a little flame of a desire for liberation at that stage, but I wanted to grab it as quick as I could. And then that flame gets bigger and bigger until it becomes a burning desire. And in that sense, it burns your sanskara. It burns all your connections to your mortal self, your mortal existence. And once it's like you burn it up in a bonfire. And when you do that, all that's left is your higher self. So it's a process. All of this, I keep saying, it's all mechanical. It's all a process. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle. Get all the pieces together, and then there's the big picture. It's all full of clarity, and end of job. You put the lid back on the box and put it away, and just get on with your life. The Zen masters put it beautifully. Before realization, chop wood and carry water. After realization, chop wood and carry water. Well, the big
Beautiful.
difference is as to who's carrying the water and chopping the wood first, and who's carrying the water and chopping the wood second. All right, Jacqui?
Yes.
Well, I better continue on. So Krishna goes on to explain to Arjuna that the devotional, those full of love, need a form, an idol. Have I read all that? No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. An idol for worship. Like here at home, I've got a statue of Buddha outside a little garden where my study is. We've got another one. My wife likes Buddha as well, in front of a little garden in front of our bedroom. I've got little statues of Buddha on my desk in my study. I've got a little statue that a lady who went to India and brought us all back a little gift, a little like bronze statue of a sannyasin, just standing there with his stick and his bowl. Totally, so I've got these little knickknacks around. I enjoy every now and again looking at them, but like you said yourself, they're just reminders. I don't kneel down and worship them, or some people do. They're rituals, but they can be traps. People can get hooked up and forget what it is they're worshipping. They end up just worshipping a lump of wood or a cross or a statue or something like that. It's what that statue or cross is representing that you've got to put the focus on as to what it is you're wanting to worship. Might sound very simple and easy and clear, but people get waylaid. Ego has all ways of trying to entrap people and put them off the path. All right, so he says the people who, like Arjuna and most of us, we need a form at this stage because we still lack the capacity to focus our attention on the unmanifest form whilst they are in a physical form. So while we've still got a physical form, Jacqui and listeners, it's very hard to identify with something that hasn't got any form. So we still find it easier, But as I say, that's only a temporary stage. We're all working to get beyond that, which I'll come to in a few minutes. By identifying themselves with the physical, they therefore need to have a concept of God having some sort of form or body. On the other hand, those operating from an introverted, intuitive state can concentrate on the all-pervading reality by freeing themselves from their body consciousness. They can thus identify with the undefinable, unmanifest, eternal one. Those who pursue the formless encounter great hardships. Right, Jacqui? So this is going back to your query about people who are just starting to look at trees or aspects of nature and thinking how beautiful and awesome it is. They're getting that feeling, which is terrific. But he's saying here that those who are trying to worship the formless form face greater hardships. For it's more difficult for those who possess a body to realize me as without one. So the person who's looking at the nature, as you say, has then got to look at their aspect of nature, a body and a mind and emotions and senses. And they've got to go past that to get to what they're looking at. Do you understand what I'm saying, Jack?
I'm just thinking though, like I've come across people, like I don't think when I describe about the nature that they're looking so much at nature, there's a sense of awe and wonder about what and how created it in the way that it is. Like there's a recognition of a higher power. It's termed more in a mother nature way rather than associating it with a god or a religion. So I just hope I made that part clear enough for everyone listening that I think you do. Certainly there are people who can just appreciate the beauty of nature. That's one thing. But I suppose it was that deeper way I was meaning, that they really have a sense of something quite powerful allowed this to be.
Yeah. Well, I understood that.
Okay, good.
But again, it's, one's only, for me, an extension of the other. That just looking and saying, oh, it's a beautiful sunset, or it's a lovely tree, or a little creek running past, and then taking it to the next step of saying, wonder what's behind all this, or how did this come about? That's that next step. But see, this is the reference to Naguna and Saguna. All of that's still in the realm of what's known as Saguna, within the realm of Prakriti, within the realm of the three gunas. That's giving them some sort of inkling as to Nirguna, above the gunas, but there has to be there's a big step between those two, Jacqui. Yeah, but as I say, it's yeah. I've spent nearly 20 years with some groups, or with the current group, trying to sort all that sort of out. So trying to do it in, in 40-minute sort of, and a being has to have a huge amount of background knowledge to, go. And again, just a reminder to you, Jacqui, and to the listeners, I'm only scratching the surface of this great teaching. Anyone who's fair income and wants to, complete the journey is one finished just by listening to the 40 podcasts, which we're getting close to finishing. A lot more water still needs to flow under the bridge. So the being is on a journey, some further than others, and that's all understood. We've touched on that. That's no problem. Being on the journey is a great benefit. I often refer to it as hitting the jackpot in an early podcast. Majority of humans don't even know that there's such a thing as a journey, and being ready to start on it. So everyone that's listening to these podcasts, and I've congratulated them before, Jacqui, is finally doing what a human being needs to do. And then there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that spiritual journey. And you've got no choice, just one step at a time. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. He says, it's difficult for those who possess a body to realize me as without one. And he says this state is not attainable by many. So he's making it very clear that that's a very difficult path to take. And even the ones who do take it, my understanding from a karmic aspect is that those people would have done a huge amount of work in many lifetimes leading up to the one where they can do a fair, meditate a lot right from an early age, have deep insights and spiritual experiences and so on. But that would again be a result of work that's been done and is coming to fruition, if you like, in this particular embodiment. We need to always be mindful not to look at it just in one lifetime. It has to be looking at it as a continuum. So you, Jacqui, me, all of our listeners, this is our first foray into talking about and looking at this sort of material. We've already done it for a number of lifetimes, and this lifetime we've kicked in earlier and stronger and continuing on with what we're doing. So Krishna concludes this segment by saying, keep in mind, Arjuna, that worshipping divinity in a form will only help for a while. And I mentioned this earlier on. Yeah. So what we're doing, worshipping with a form, it's only a temporary episode. He says, ultimately, all those seeking full liberation must sooner or later give up their attachment to the body. So remember, first podcast, I mentioned the temple in Apollo and the inscription, know thyself. You've got to know that you're not this body, you're not this mind, you're not these emotions, you're not these five senses, you're the higher self. So he says, ultimately, you got to give up your attachment to your mortal aspect. It's not just the body we're talking about. We're talking about the inner body as well, the subtle body, the mind and the emotions, ego and buddhi. So he says, sooner or later, you will have to give up your attachment to them. Either way, whether one worships a formless God or one without form, A seeker finally uses single-pointed concentration and meditation to gain enlightenment. So that sums it up beautifully, doesn't it, Jacqui? Yeah, you can use either one you like. Most of us are using worshipping the God with form, because it's simpler and easier for us to, as humans, to get our heads around. But eventually, we need to go beyond that. All right. So, and he describes it here. The identification has to shift, which is doing for all of us, from the mortal aspect across to the immortal aspect. And that's the spiritual journey that the being's on. So anything there, Jacqui?
Well, just another little contemplation. I'm not, this is more an observation really than anything else. I'm just thinking to the times when I've worked in the corporate space doing meditation workshops and, wellness orientated workshops. And I couldn't help but notice that often the younger generation, like occasionally I'd end up being sent in to say like a tech company, a tech startup where there's not a single person over like late 20s. And a lot of other times I'd be in organizations that were more formal and old school and everybody was sort of in their 40s and 50s. And I couldn't help but notice, and I wonder if there's a generational shift, because when I think of young people, I don't really know any young people that worship any form really, unless they've grown up in a religious family. It's almost like that's an obsolete thing now for, the much younger generations. Where the older generations, even if you didn't grow up in a strict religious family, there's a sense of people around you, even if you don't personally, you know that people around you do worship form. Often when I was sharing groups and seminars and practices and things like that, it's almost like young people, even though I wouldn't say that they necessarily have been studying any sort of spirituality or overtly interested, they kind of seem more open in a lot of ways. It's almost like a given that, yeah, there's something energetic going on around, that we've got they might even use the word soul. Maybe they don't really have a true comprehension of what that is. I don't know. I just often would find the younger generation were far more open to this notion of we're meditating to connect with something, like, yes, to find peace and centeredness and release stress or whatever. But there was a notion of, and just an easy acceptance that there's some bigger, more powerful thing going on around us. Whereas the older people often would be sort of eyeing you off with suspicion that, like, what are you doing here? And what are you trying to even hint at with some of these practices? So, yeah, nothing definitive, but just seemed a relevant sharing, that sort of touching upon some of this stuff of form and formless and younger generations and older generations and evolution of humanity as we all come in and out of life and embodiment.
Well, I've got really nothing to say other than I think it's very useful for you that you're having all these observations of them, you, intergenerational. That's really part of the jigsaw puzzle, part of what everyone's got to look at. I'm a lot older than you, obviously, and I've sort of been there, done that, seen it all, still seeing it all. I don't. Yeah, I have discussions with some of my senior students on this. That some of them are adamant that there is a shift, and the younger people are, starting to look at these things more closely. And that I say, well, I'd love that to be the case, but I can't pretend, Jacqui, or make things up. And I know I'm isolated, and I'm down here at little old Sleepy Hollow, Torquay, as against big Melbourne or Sydney or New York or London or something like that. Um, um, but I'm glad that I'm down here. It's a quieter, more conducive sort of lifestyle to make these spiritual connection. But all I'm simply saying is I don't see, my observation doesn't show me anything I see on the news, anything I read, anything I observe, that there's a groundswell of especially these younger people that you're referring to, looking into any of these areas. They might have that sense of openness, but I think, if you think about it, when you were that age, when I was that age, you're young. It's like a baby, at 1 year old and 2 year old. Go into a supermarket, looking around everywhere. Geez, what's a supermarket? Go to a restaurant. or go to the zoo, there's all these animals. Everything's new, everything's awesome, everything's, exciting in a sense. But the trap is that if they're, the likelihood is that they'll just get caught up in the world that they're living in. They'll identify with their bodies, their jobs, their husbands and wives, their children, and a circle of friends, their hobbies, and So it's not easy to wake up, and it's not easy to start on your spiritual journey, and it's not just a one lifetime occasion, Jacqui, is what I'm saying. So if any of these people that you're, or anyone that's younger, hasn't done previous work, it's going to be very hard for them to make a start in this lifetime, and it'll just be the briefest of sort of the smallest of steps just to get them going. But there will be some. It's a evolving sort of situation. So, I'm not wanting to sound totally pessimistic that we're all goners, but there's the aspect of that this is the Kali Yuga, an age of darkness and ignorance. So it means by definition, most people are going to be in darkness and ignorance. And the darkness and ignorance that's referred to is as to who they are. So more people are going to identify with their physical form, what they can see in the mirror, what they can touch with the person next to them, what they can taste, all of the things that makes up mortal life. All right, I better move on, Jacqui. Question to continue. He lists, I'll run through these briefly. He lists to Arjuna a pragmatic approach to God, and it's a lot of what we've been touching on for many podcasts, not just this one today. He says, he outlines a series of progressive steps towards enlightenment, thus catering to all types of seekers at different levels of their personalities. He says, and he starts from the top and he sort of works his way down. So he says, those who are more advanced, they for whom I am the supreme goal, who renounce their small self for me and meditate on me with single-hearted devotion, these I will swiftly rescue from the cycles of birth and death to fullness of eternal life. So that's the people who are getting close to the end of the journey. He says the next step down, if you're not at that level, well then try and still your mind on me with full concentration, and without doubt you will be united with me, the Lord of love, dwelling in your heart. And if you can't still your mind enough, well then learn to do so through practice of meditation. So meditation then is your way where you learn to still the mind and emotions, of course. If this is too difficult, engage yourself in selfless service to all around you. So if we trace the teaching or these podcasts, Jacqui, all the way back, we started off with the last one and have worked our way up as we've gone along. There's in chapter 2 and 3, it was karma yoga, selfless action. Doing action to meet the need, not for the fruits or the outcome of what you're doing the action for. So he says, if you can't even do selfless service, well then just take refuge in me. That's like pray to me and look at statues or whatever, anything, just to make some sort of connection with me. And if you're unable to do even this, just surrender yourself to me in love, receiving success and failure with equal calmness in me. So just an acceptance of trying to be in a state of equanimity, where you don't get overexcited about the successes in your life or too despondent in failures of your life. Very basic sort of aspect. But he's just saying that any of these stages, you're still trying to make some connection with me. Just keep going and you'll gradually work your way back up this chart instead of me reading from the top down. Yeah. So we're focusing now in these last few shlokas, last few chapters on this highest point that's here. So that should be very encouraging to all of you, Jacqui and me, and all of our listeners. And he says, so Krishna now finishes the chapter by describing in the last 7 verses qualities of a lover of truth, people like us. He enumerates the 35 qualities of a true bhakta, bhakta in Sanskrit meaning a true devotee. So we started off the podcast with devotion to love, devotee, devoted. Devotion to God is not blind faith, mere prayer or routine ritual. We prove our love to and devotion to the Lord by cultivating these qualities in our everyday lives. And I'm going to read through some of them, Jacqui. I won't read all through 35, but just to give listeners an idea of what's being referred to here. And he says the purpose of such descriptions is not merely to inspire us, but to show us our real evolutionary potential. So as I read some of them out, most you and most of the listeners will relate to that. You'll say, "Oh, I'm already doing this. This is part of my life." So it won't be new. These aren't 35 new things that we've all got to look at. We're already, to a large extent, or I'd say to a very large extent, practicing them. And it indicates to us what kind of person we can become in a marvelous transformation through the practice of meditation and the allied disciplines. Lovely word there, marvelous transformation. So I'll put a little note in about alchemy. And alchemy, one of my favourites, philosophers, Egyptian sage, Hermes Trismegistus, he's regarded as the ultimate alchemist, Jacqui. And most people who understand or have any notion of alchemy, it's always changing something like a base metal, iron, or something into a precious metal, gold. And so there's a main considerations always on a monetary and a physical sort of aspect. Hermes Trismegistus teaches us that the ultimate alchemy is to transform your mortal self to your higher self. That's a huge transformation. And that's depicted in many of the stories, particularly in the East, but we have them, it's part of nature as well that you've referred to. And that's a caterpillar or a grub. And part of their life cycle is that after they go through that caterpillar or grub stage, they spin a cocoon. Metamorphosis takes place, a great transformation. So that's exactly what we're doing as human beings. And then when that transformation completes, what was a caterpillar or a grub eats its way out through the cocoon and comes out a beautiful butterfly. It's transformed from a grub or a caterpillar to a butterfly. Alchemy is gold, iron to gold. It'll never happen because they're different chemical makeups and atomic makeups and all sorts of stuff. So, they're just wishful thinking by people who embark on any of that. But for us as humans, Jacqui and listeners, that's the transformation that takes place in us. And we've touched on it a lot in our discussions today, but all the work we're doing, we're transforming ourselves from mortal human beings, which are very limited, like a grub or a caterpillar. Sorry if you get offended, I'm calling you a grub or a caterpillar, but in the analogy, that's what we all are. Until we wake up and we start spinning a cocoon. Spinning the cocoon is where you have lifetimes where you learn. You learn all these things, meditation, right action, all of those sorts of things, until you get to a stage where your devotion gets stronger and stronger and overpowers everything else, and you want full devotion to the Lord, in which case you'll come out the beautiful butterfly at the end. We'd call it a realized being or an enlightened person. So, so just to read some of them out, Jacqui, to finish up, and we've gone over time again. I don't know how that happens, but I'm going to read from a chart. Don't know if people can see that. That's just a list. But a lady, one of my Rhonda, a beautiful lady, unfortunately not with us anymore, passed a few years ago. But she was my first student when I started down here at teaching in Geelong. And that's 18 years ago now. So she was with me for most of those 18 years. Not only was she a top student, but she was a beautiful soul. And some of the people who are listening remember her. She was they were in the same group. There's half a dozen that probably started at that same time. So we've been together on a long journey for many years. So she was not only a top student and a beautiful soul, but also a true bhakta, a devotee of the Lord. But she left us with a lasting legacy in that she, when we were studying the Gita at that stage, about 10, 12 years ago, that she put together these 35 qualities out of the Gita. So we could all have them. You could pin them up on a fridge or whatever, or just look at them every now and again. And next week I'll refer in the next podcast, because it'll talk about 20 qualities in another sense. And she did a handout on that as well. So Rhonda's going to get 2 mentions here. So she summarised these 35 qualities onto one page, some of which I'll now share with our listeners. So I'll just quickly read some of these out, Jacqui. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your homework as well, listeners. So I can kill 2 birds here with the one stone. I'm asking you in your homework, um, do you feel like you have already cultivated some of these qualities into your life as true devotees? And do you intend to continue cultivating them further in the remaining years of your life? So here we go, Jacqui, and this is where I'll finish. We prove our devotion to love to God by cultivating these following qualities. There's 35, but I won't read them all. Not hating any being. Many of our listeners, that's not even worthy of discussion, is it? You might not be over keen on some people, but very few listening would say, I hate someone. Being friendly, being compassionate, free from attachments to possessions, free from egoism. That's a very important one, folk. You've got to let go of that ego. Balanced in pleasure and pain, forgiving, ever perfectly content, uniting with the self, self-controlled, having firm conviction. We've all got firmer and firmer conviction these days, haven't we, Jacqui, as to what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the end goal is. Even if it's a lamppost too far, it's all becoming clear, or it's part of the scene. Not agitated by the world. Don't get overexcited what's happening in Ukraine or in Gaza. It's happening. It's terrible. It's tragic. But that's just how the world operates. That's the people in the world. That's the level that they're operating from. A lot of those are very hateful beings. They're so hateful they want to kill people and blow them up and all sorts of things. Freed from joy, envy, fear, anxiety, free from want. People would be saying they don't want as many things. They're not saying, oh, I've got to have that, I've got to have that, I've got to have that. Untroubled, don't grieve, do not desire. Free from attachment, I've already read that one. Silent, content with anything, steady-minded, endued with faith, regarding me as supreme. So that's, about 20 of them. I suppose I didn't leave too many out. So it finishes off by saying, the Lord declares that those who infuse these sublime qualities into their lives as his true devotees are exceedingly dear to him, and he will go beyond death to eternal life. So as we keep practicing these qualities, making them stronger within us, it pushes out the opposite qualities. Yeah, not hating anyone gets rid of hating people. One opposite gets rid of the other opposite. By being more kind, well, you're not being unkind. It's pretty easy to relate to. All right, Jacqui, have you got any final comments you want to make, or point or something?
No, just that that's a lovely list as people go on through the week ahead, looking at ways they can be more loving, more kind, more uplifting, more focused on the formless. They're nice sentiments to carry into the week ahead.
Yeah, you referred to this yourself a week or two ago. I remember saying, you're just trying to be a nicer person all the time. Well, these qualities really sum that up. just I could have said, are you realizing you want to be a nicer person every day as you go? And you're trying to be a nicer person and you want to get even nicer. So it's the same thing. Those qualities mean that describes a nice person. If you haven't got them, well, it describes not a nice person. So, yeah, different ways of saying it, but yeah, that's it.
Very good. Well, another wonderful session. Thank you so much. So chapter 12, we're done and dusted with chapter 12,
Yep,
and
yep,
next episode we'll be beginning with chapter 13.
yes, yep. And
Wonderful.
we'll be back to part 1 and part 2 for the next few chapters.
I have a feeling we will need it. All right, everybody. Lovely to connect. Enjoy your week ahead. Happy homework, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye for now.